It's today in EVE Online, February 24th, 2020. I am Matterall here with a bunch of friends. We're going to talk about broker relations today. A new change is coming through. It will essentially introduce a new tick size. Does that make sense? Yeah. It's going to change the broker fees from stations from a minimum of 0% to a 1%. That is for player stations. There is a margin trading skill that will reduce that fee. Why are my notes all messed up? Holy fuck. All right, well, we're going to get into these. I'll have to read them myself when we go through this. I got like 6-7 guys in here all interested in finance. So let's get to it. Broker fees changing. All right, guys. Who's here? Caleb?
Yeah, man.
Amar.
Hey.
All right, and then I'll just introduce everybody else that talks. We have Roliat, Z-Master. But Amar and Caleb are guys I talk with a lot about economy and stuff like that. What are both your guys' quick take on this?
Finally, amazing. There's a few things that could be better, but in general, this is like 75% of what's been needed for a long time.
I guess I might be more neutral. I think it's the changes are quite reasonable. There's going to be big changes for some traders, including myself, who does a lot of active station trading. I'm a bit curious about the margin trading since it has different implications for new players as opposed to old veterans.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But generally speaking, quite good.
All right. Let me actually say what is changing for people who are listening to this after the fact. The summary of changes. And so this is an overview of the changes. Introducing tick size. It's a limit on precision creating or updating an order. And what that means is they're not going to allow you to do the 0.1 cent changes anymore. What it looks like is whatever your order is, 4 digits back is the interval that you have to change at. So if I have $1 million ISK order, in order for me to modify it, I can't go and add a cent to it or 2 cents to it, or even 1,000 or 100. I have to go all the way to, I guess it would be like the 10,000 mark or something, whatever 4 digits is.
It's 0.1% is the minimal increment that you can change it with, right? You have to bid more than 0.1%.
Okay. So for an order of 1 million, you would have to change 1,000th or more. So yes. You would go up 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. All the zeros behind that can't be changed.
Exactly.
And that's interesting, but not that interesting. Like, why do you suspect that?
Because it's got to do with competition in price and the whole bidding war of how a market works, right? And what you do is you make a serious bid saying, okay, if this is what the current market competitive bidding is, I'm going to then bid this much to actually compete with that, right? But in the past, it was not really about competing on the price. It was pretty much just who was around to actually modify and jump the queue.
Right. That's what I thought too. The 1% thing was just, it didn't really matter. It was more the, but I think that might help a little with, since it's only 4 digits, we're looking at 1 million changing by 1,000 every increment. But 1 million is kind of low for some of the stuff that's bought. Like a ship is 25 times that. Even a frigate, a T2 frigate would be like about 25 million. So you're going to be changing on the 10,000th. So it's going to be 10,000 each time. So eventually it adds up.
The big change on that one the obvious example is Plex, where the margins are so slim and so small that even just changing it 1,000 one way or the other really has a big impact on the profits you would make from trading in Plex. So that's very significant just for Plex.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, but they're selling for, that's what, 3,400,000. But it does, the margins are so tight with taxes and these fees, it's it will affect it.
Well, okay, like usually you have between 20 to 30,000 ISK per Plex you actually make in profit, depending of the guys in the 0.0% stations get more, generally speaking. So if you start, like, if you're 10 people competing in that market and trying to make those modifications, that's not even including the broker fee changes. I guess you're going to get to that. That's gonna decrease the margins very rapidly.
Okay,
but what it's really going to do is something quite important. It's kind of going to sort the volume stacks according to whether or not it's a seller's or a buyer's market, because of these bidding price increments, right? You can no longer expect something to change just by someone coming in and just offering, say, half a day's of volume traded. It's not going to be like that anymore. We're going to get these proper market depth developments eventually.
Right. Now, again, this is we're giving examples, and they give examples in this of certain price structures and where you can make the incremental changes for modifications, meaning change your bid a bit higher to get on top of your competition. What they don't show is stuff like the bigger stuff that might cost, like a structure, for instance, it might cost $7 billion or something. At that point, you're going to be well into the hundreds of thousands. Well, I don't know. It just feels like it's not quite. If it was 3, it would be more menacing, but 4 is just kind of perfect for the not hurting too much, the modification. Anyway, spent too much time on this already. We'll come back to it. So introduction of tick size change. It's going to be 4 digits away from the first digit. Everything after that, all those zeros can't be changed. Upwell structures, those are player structures. The minimum fee has gone from 0 to 1%. No more 0% structures for the market.
And half of that will be taken as a sink, right? As a fee.
Yes. So that's just basically ISK drain. So I guess, so you can have half, if you put it at 1%, your structure at 1%, so your friends can buy stuff at your market for 1%, then half of that 1% is going to NPCs. It's going out.
Yeah.
So you're only getting 0.5%. And so the obvious question is, if I put it at 3%, am I getting 2.5%?
Yeah.
Okay. So now there is always a fee sink for
0.5.
Yeah. Okay. Next change is increase fees that are charged when modifying an order. So this is the second part of the modifying an order changes. And those fees are now...
They're adding another variable onto that, right? And then it's a bit of a new equation, and they will change the margin trading skill to be something that you can use to reduce that modification fee. So and it's actually pretty good. You can modify it down, so at the max level, you actually get a deduction of 75%, which is quite good. It's good for competition all around, in my opinion. I know that some will say that, well, this makes trading a bit more difficult, but it really doesn't. It just means that because it reflects real life a lot better, you can actually read up on things and you can actually use knowledge to get ahead. And I think that's really what's been missing for a long time.
Okay. I am sorry that I am stumbling all over this thing. I actually listened to it twice, and then I just completely forgot everything that I heard. So I'm going down to the formula now for how much that increase is. So you're going to pay more for modifying an order. How much more? There is a whole formula. But essentially, it's a character broker rate of 3%, has a realist discount of 60%. Wow, this is like something you're going to have to read and try to understand. Do you guys understand how much the fees are going up for changing an order?
You're going to have to wait to get the numbers broken down properly, but they're pretty linear. So I don't think at this point that I expect any of these things to break. They seem so straightforward that there's no real complexity. They're going to increment linearly, and that means that it's not going to go like crazy math. Basically, someone that looked and decided to do this has actually read up on how things are done in real life.
But it's a very significant change in the amount as to what it was. If you were doing small increases or decreases of the pricing of your orders, you would normally just neglect that extra cost of modifying the order. That's not going to be the case anymore. The examples they have actually illustrated quite well, as you can see on screen now as well. So if you have a 2 million order, that would be a broker fee of 60,000 ISK. To modify it in this case going down in price, you would pay another 23,000 and the next example is 22. So that's more than a third of the original broker fee price. So you could compare it like just looking at that example. If you were to modify your order 3 times with these kinds of price changes, because it goes up and down the more you change the price as well, you would basically pay double the broker fees after having modified it those 3 times. And that has really big implications, especially on items that have a very low or small margin for profit. So Plex is once again one of those examples where just modifying a Plex order once now, as the margins are at the moment, you will start losing money from doing it. So that means that the Plex margins are bound to go up, for example, but it's going to have less of an impact on items that might not be traded as much. Take ship skins, for example, where you usually have very big margins. So modifying them several times is still very doable. But people have been saying that this is going to effectively kill station trading. And I disagree, because it is going to very much alter some items that are being station traded, but not all of them, of course. And if anything, this means that people will have to rethink how they approach station trading as it is now.
Yeah, Fonsway says.
I think,
Fonsway agrees with you. He says it kills today's station trading.
Yeah. It makes it more like the real world, and it makes it more sane, because the very short version of explaining this, aside from all the margin and nominal stuff that Ima was just pointing out, is that basically you can say that if you have a very, very big stack of titanium, you will benefit from this, as opposed to people that have a smaller stack. You're basically going to be able to afford more modifications on the thing that you actually put up.
And one thing that someone pointed out in chat as well, and CCP mentioned this in the article as well, this is also meant to counter some of the trading bots that has been known to be in the game, because they tend to modify the orders very, very frequently, and by doing this change, those will no longer be profitable.
Yeah, I was going to get to that, like why the changes are happening. But okay. I wanted to go through the changes first, and I got stuck on how much the modification of an order fees were going to be, because I didn't memorize that formula. Now that I know it's a formula, I remember why I didn't memorize it. The last change is the skill that was called margin trading skill. For a long time, people have thought that skill really didn't have any value, except maybe to help you scam people. So they're changing that skill to basically be a tax reduction skill on the modification fees that are now changing. So that's what that new skill will do, and I think it's a pretty hefty discount. So let's go look at that discount real quick.
It's got a huge downside. Of course, the upside is that it's going to remove the scamming. But
well, hold on before we get into. Hold on, before we get to that, I just want to call out what the margin skill trading discount will be. So at 0%, your margin trade skill level relist discount is 50%. Now, why at 0% skill will you have a 50% discount? Does that mean
it's just the beginner thing? It must mean that when you've injected it but haven't actually trained it to level 1.
So just injecting it will give you 50% off that. Okay. And then it goes at level 1, it goes up 5% until, so it'll be 55% at level 1, at level 2, 60, at level 3, 65, at level 4, 70%, at level 5, 75% discount. That's pretty flat. But that's a pretty good change, or substantial change, 75% off the discount. Off the relist fees that are new. Okay, so those are the 4 changes. I'm going to review one more because we've said a bunch of stuff here. 1, they're introducing a new minimum tick size for changing an order, which means you'll no longer be able to change just a few cents in order to get on top of somebody else's order. Number 2 change is there is a 0.5 NPC tax for every structure, including player structures. And player structures will have to have a minimum of 1% tax. So no more 0% tax havens. 3rd change, a new relist charge that is got a formula attached to it, so we don't know how much it is. It depends on how much the item is. And thirdly, the margin skill trading will reduce your new tax, your new relist charge for you. Those are the 4 changes going through. Now let's try to dig into these things a bit more. Well, first of all, why did they make these changes?
Well, it's the long discussed issue with margin trading being used as a scamming tool. I think that played a lot into the actual deciding to remove it. The downside is, of course, that what's called market depth and the cost to put in your buy orders has just pretty much gone up by 5 times for the serious traders, even new serious traders, right? Because if you have to have that much liquid ISK locked up all the time, that's just going to add another strain. So I don't know how that's going to long-term affect the market depth on market orders, but it's definitely going to have an effect. And I would say that this is a good time for CCP to consider doing something like bringing in a collateralized loan contract, because we've been promised that in the past, and that could actually free up the liquid ISK that's going to be needed for the market.
All right. So, but why did they make these changes? What was wrong with the market before?
Well, you pretty much got a leveraged or geared market, right? You could put up $1 million and it would be valued in market depth at 5 million. So that was kind of a geared buyer's market. The second is that you, of course, have the market scamming that was completely abused, and it has been an issue since inception.
I don't think it's that much of an issue. But if you start looking at them one by one instead, I think that might be easier. If you look at the first change, or is that the first change, the 0% to 1%, basically the intentions of increasing the broker fees and the sales taxes that they did earlier, was it this year? No, last year, of course, was to increase the ISK sinks in the game. Because generally speaking, going way back, we've had an issue of there's so much ISK coming into the game and not enough coming out of it. Mm-hmm. So that's just addressing, it's not really a loophole, but basically the player-owned structures, the tax on those wasn't actually draining ISK from the game itself. So that's being addressed. The second change is when it comes to the 4-figure thing.
Well, let's stop there for a second. If everybody's rich in the game, then nobody's rich. Yes,
exactly.
And so you need to drain money out of it to make money more valuable. You can always see money. The money represents labor in EVE Online, right? Sorry, we keep using money. I keep using money. I'm going to say ISK. ISK represents labor in the game. So if you're mining asteroids and then you turn them in and sell them and you get a certain amount of ISK, then that represents how long it took you to do that. And that's the price of labor. Same thing if you're ratting.
The example I would use is not one that came from another player, but rather one that came from the system. So like bounties or blue loot or red loot is more of an apt example for what you're describing.
Right. So NPC ratting, basically, mining, these are things that are they create money out of nowhere, I think. Right? Because you harvest an asteroid.
So mining doesn't create currency. Mining creates goods. It creates resources. So that's why I suggest bounties, red loot, and blue loot, which create ISK directly.
Those are direct. But I think if you're harvesting an asteroid, you're bringing something into the world, the virtual world, out of nothing. You do have to sell it.
You're sinking ISK out of the game if you do that. At least if it hits the market in any way, and even if you use it, it's still potentially going to sink ISK out of the game.
Okay, but I'm thinking of labor. Like people use their time to do a thing that creates ISK.
I think a good comparison to real life is basically when you look at ratting and the blue loot and red loot, like Fansui mentioned, that's like the money printers in the game. They print money, and as everyone knows, if you print too much money, it's going to cause inflation, and the money is going to be worth less.
Okay.
So basically, the ISK by itself is later on translated as a substitute for your invested time, which is the same way we use money in real life. I create a share, and someone pays me money because they managed to earn money somehow. So they give me a representation of their time and effort. And the same thing can then be applied to mining. Mining doesn't actually print ISK into the game, but you will mine materials and someone else will pay you with ISK as a replacement of time and effort. And that's the way, that's all.
But it still always syncs ISK. It always syncs ISK. Whenever you are utilizing the raw materials that you have sourced, you always eventually end up risking syncing ISK out of the game. Because if you're trading it or if you're using it in a station to actually produce, you're always syncing ISK out of the game. So
the life cycle of that item, the life cycle of that item from being mined to being destroyed in a ship on the field, every step of the way, a cut gets taken out of it somewhere.
Yeah.
Tax here, fees there. But the changes overall are clearly targeted at one issue that really is two groups. And the one issue is the fact that the market has been a brute force system until now. It has been essentially infinitely scalable, both in terms of time and characters, etc. And anyone who had the biggest hammer, was able to dominate. And it was simply brute force, and there was very little wisdom behind it, despite the fact that there's zillions of spreadsheets and there is a lot of valid wisdom. But in the end, it was a brute force tool. So these changes attack that root issue, which was causing two problems. One is we had a particularly dominant population that was, owning the market sector, and the other was bots. So this will hit bots, but this is also going to hit people who behaved as if they were bots.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, so I wonder, okay, and that's good. So I was going to get to that, but before I wanted to put things in perspective. And what I was going for was that ISK is equivalent to what the cost of labor is in the game, and it is pegged to Plex. So as Plex goes up or down in price, it's not actually moving. Hold on,
it's not right.
But this is what we got from Hilmar.
It's not right. You can't say that anything
Plex is fixed. ISK is variable.
But
the ISK is variable, and as it grows, it's going to be reflected in the actual nominal cost of things like Plex. So you can't say that it's pegged. They are linked directly, but they're not pegged.
Sorry, I'm using bad terms then. I meant linked, not pegged. Pegged means it goes up and down with it, and that's not true. It's linked.
And it's the ISK printing that sets the nominal price on everything in the game. And because ISK printing has been way too high and way too easy, everything has just stayed stagnant or flat and only moved on things like Plex.
But interestingly, It's not just the ISK generation that they worry about, because they said the most amount of money that players get is from added service or added value to, I think it's trading.
No.
Isn't that what they said?
You're mixing printing of ISK into the system with profitability. Those two are not the same thing.
Okay.
The ISK that comes into the game is only from the printing mechanisms that's designed by CCP. How things move between players is the open and free market, and maybe services are pretty high in redistributing ISK at the moment. I would actually expect that, especially with things like TTT.
Yeah, ISK itself enters the game through a very, very limited number of sources. It's direct payouts like bounties, for invasions and incursions and ratting. It is red loot, it is blue loot, it is overseer's effects from DED sites. And I'm pretty sure that's the list. I may have missed one or two things here, but I'm pretty sure those are all the big hitters.
And
Project Discovery as well.
Yeah, anything that's a direct payout creates ISK. But those are the only actual sources of the ISK currency itself, which will inflate and deflate based on how easy or hard it is to do those specific activities. The price of the other items with relation to each other only changes when the desirability of those particular items changes. And they are all just occupying a share of the total ISK space, which is determined by those creation activities.
Yeah.
And just a small note, right? This is actually a fix that's going to potentially make professional academics interested in EVE economics again.
Absolutely.
So you're also hearing from Fonsui, who's been talking, and Ashtrothy. I heard him in there in the background. What are you guys' initial thoughts of these changes?
I mean, this is going to reward wisdom, foreknowledge, planning, research, good decision making as opposed to brute force. So obviously I'm behind it.
In other words, better planning equals better results.
Yeah, attacking the brute force nature of the market, as I said, attacks both the botters and the players who are using bot-like tactics, i.e. brute force.
Yeah.
Honestly, I like the margin trade change just because people will no longer be able to do the margin trade scam. That's the only reason.
I could have gone either way on taking away the margin thing. I was okay with the scam existing. I kind of enjoyed having the skill. I used it in a very, very legitimate manner. I'm sure a lot of people did.
Did you
I don't
actually
think it had to
benefit
go
from that
away.
skill?
Absolutely, I was able to move money around.
Tell me how. Okay,
but
to
as
tell me
long as
how.
I made sure.
Tell me how the margin trading skill worked, and then tell me how it was used effectively, and then tell me how it was used corruptly.
So the margin trading skill. So when an order is placed, until this change goes live, when an order is placed, then only a portion of the full amount that will be required to cover that order when it is executed is required at the time that the order is made. The margin trading skill reduces that amount that is required. It makes it you put down a smaller percentage. So you could put down 10% or 50% or whatever it is of the cost of the item. You don't have to have all of the ISK in the wallet of the character at the time that the order is placed.
Okay, stop
Some
there.
of it
Stop
gets
there.
taken away.
What's the advantage of that?
So
it's a geared investment.
Go ahead.
Right? You're basically if your profit on what you've put up as an order is say 2%, because you have that geared thing, you're actually potentially going to make 10% because it's just gearing that market investment up by a factor of 5.
All right, you got too advanced. You got too advanced for me.
The actual name of the
So
we can do it more simply.
plainly spoken, the less I have to sink in, the less I have to invest, the more, in a single order, the more I get to invest in multiple orders. And if I'm selling as fast as I'm buying, or at least vaguely as fast as I'm buying, then my wallet is filling up as fast as it's depleting. So it sets the watermark of the amount of ISK that you have to sink in order to begin to trade. So that was the
It's really
advantage.
simple, actually. So like when we're purchasing something, we think about it like I go there and I want to buy that thing, right? So you think, do I want to buy right now in a sell order, or do I want to wait on a buy order? You put up a buy order, you maintain your buy order, and you hope that buy order fills. That is not what a margin trader does. A margin trader looks at the different markets and looks at the margins on items and says, well, if this buy order was filled, then I could flip it and sell it for this. So they don't care if any one item is fulfilled. So they can broadly put out buy orders, knowing that whatever does get filled, they can just flip, right? But they don't have an expectation for it to all be filled. They don't have the ISK for everything.
Yeah, I end up canceling orders. I'm just putting up positions here and there. I'm like, I'm ready to catch a whole bunch of different things, and I'm trying to sling a whole bunch of other things.
Okay.
And this margin trading skill allows me to sink less into that, which allows me to spread my net much wider.
Okay, so essentially what the margin trader skill is a way for you to overextend yourself.
Yes.
It's a free loan.
Okay, right.
Yep.
And just to be clear,
I used it legitimately.
and just to be clear for people who don't understand it, because I think it's kind of complex, is that you basically have enough money for one item. And if it was a typical market, you would pay your money for that one item, and that's all you could afford. But a margin trader can say, I want to buy that item, and here's 20% down payment. Yeah, 20% deposit, 20% down payment. And so I can now put orders up for 5 of those things, hoping that one will fill with the money that I had just for one item. The problem is, and this is where the scam is, go ahead and explain what the problem with that is.
So the scam is how these work. If there is not enough ISK in the wallet of the character that put up the order at the time that the order is transacted. So in other words, I put up an order, I say I'm buying item X for 1 billion ISK. And it takes 200 million ISK out of my wallet and it puts it into the order in escrow and it holds it, which means that 800 million more is needed from me to go to the seller when they sell me this item and I buy it from them. When they go ahead and drop the item on my buy order, I owe them 800 million more. The system is holding 200 of mine. If that ISK is not in my wallet when someone tries to drop the thing on my order and sell it to me, then the system will cancel out the order completely. The person who tried to sell it to me will keep their item. My order will be deleted, and whatever I put into the system in escrow will be returned to me. It's as if the order was never made, and as if I paid the cancellation fee. So what people will do is they'll have an order up that they know will fail. They know if someone tries to drop something on this order, they don't have enough ISK to cover it. The order will simply fail.
Stop there.
And then
Stop there.
go
So
ahead.
basically, they're putting up an order, and the account that put the money up for the order doesn't have enough money to fulfill it.
Yeah, that means you
Yeah.
can bait
Right.
and switch, right? So
So then
you
I
have a
go-
Sorry, hold on.
someone-
Let's stay
yeah.
with Fonsway on this, just so we can
Yeah,
finish
sorry.
it.
No, so then I go ahead. I have this order up that I know doesn't have the money to back it, and it's going to get canceled as soon as someone drops something on it. And then I goad someone into buying something at way more than it's worth, usually a garbage item, because they think they're going to be able to drop it onto my way, way ridiculous buy order, which is fake.
Well, the most common method of using this that I have seen is
I have a picture of this. This happened
officer.
yesterday.
Well, I'm just saying
Yes,
of
officer
items.
stuff. Yep.
Because
Let me
it
find
doesn't
this
even need to
picture.
be right. It doesn't even need to be like a ridiculous deal or whatever. It's just those things are super hard to move. So what happens is that if things are too good to be true, they are sort of thing. So person comes in,
Twitch
sees
chat
that there's an
image.
sees that there's an item that's on sale for or that's being bought for way more than it's supposed to. So then they do a search on the market and they see that there's one 4 jumps away that's reasonably priced, and they think to themselves, oh man, I can just go buy that one really quick and bring it over here and then sell it this order, and I make like $1 billion ISK. And so then they go and do that, not knowing that the item that's 4 jumps away is also yours. So you've been wanting to move that item. So now they go and they buy that item, go get it, then try to sell it to your margin traded sell order. That's on a different character, obviously. And then that fails, and now they're holding the purple item that they can't sell.
Okay, does that sound about right for everybody
Yeah.
else?
There's multiple ways that you can use this. The idea you can goad someone into doing a lot of stuff. Basically, something that you wanted to move, something that you bought specifically to bait them with. There's 7 different ways to skin this cat, and I put a picture of it happening in action yesterday that I screenshotted. I put the image in Twitch chat.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and put that up on screen.
That one, the most effective one that people are using, and you can, if you've been watching Gita Local, there used to be a lot of spam on these. Not a lot. It's actually one of the least common scams that people tend to do because it's way more complex than the majority of them. But what they would do is they would buy out an officer item, usually just 2 or 3 items. They would re-enlist one of them, which is still very much higher than the buy order they will put up using the margin trading skill. And then they will do contracts that they spam in Gita Local that is below the buy order, inducing people to buy from the contract, and then it will completely fail. That's the most common thing and the most successful. And there are some people who made like literally hundreds of billions of it, but it's the least common scam you're likely to see out of all of the ones in the game.
So the scam that you see on the screen is, so that guy is the one selling it in the seller screen for 600 and whatever mil. And he's also the one buying it without the money to back it up. And if you look at chat, someone's like, somebody screwed up their buy order pretty bad, LMAO. The
Mhm.
one time I'm flat broke, I see this glorious mistake. So obviously the first time I saw that, I knew it was a scam. He was goading someone into buying the tag to try to sell it. But I just decided to see, just to be 1,000,000% sure. So I watched it for 5 minutes, and that person was spamming it.
Right. So they're carnival barking at for attention. So somebody will say, "Hey, check this out. This guy screwed up. Take advantage of it." So what we're saying is, if the victim comes into the market, he sees that this item sells for 1 million, and he sees that somebody wants to buy it for 10 million. So he's thinking, "I'm going to buy it for 1 million, and then I'm going to sell it to this guy for 10 million, and I'm going to make 9 million in profit." So he goes ahead and he buys it. And then he tries to sell it to that 10 million buy order, and the buy order says, "Oops, there's not enough money in this account. This order is canceled. Keep your item." And what he's just done is sold you an item by incentivizing you to buy it and sell it to somebody else for a profit. Now you got an item that you may not even have wanted, but you were just trying to take advantage of a goof up that didn't actually exist.
And just to clear out, there's also another way where you clear out your own escrow deliberately, which is a little bit more risky. And when you're doing that, some people can actually take advantage of you putting up that market order if they get in there and sell to your order before you actually manage to clear it yourself.
And Market Tycoon pointed out an important point. He says that the minimum volume on the buy is 2, which means that that order only accepts those tags 2 at a time.
Right. So there's another thing that they do this. This is all in one market, so it's pretty easy to say that's a scam. I can see it. There's no way that guy goofed up like that. So what's a little more difficult to see is people do this interregionally. So you might see something really high in Omar and really low in Jeddah, like extraordinarily high, and you're thinking like, whoa, I'm going to make $1 billion if I make this exchange. So you buy it in Jeddah, and by the time you get to Omar to drop it off, that order is gone.
Yeah, but it's also
Right.
time sensitive, so it's very difficult to get those done because often people actually do have. There's always someone who has that item, even if it's a very rare officer module. So when someone does put up a very high buy order, it usually takes 2 or 3 days, and then someone actually shows up and tries to sell to the buy order without buying the scam item you're trying to sell, which makes it fail and you have to set it up all over again. There used to be a big thing in the past, like if you go way back in time when there were way back, but when there were more regional trading going on in general, this setup for margin trading scam orders was way more common. They don't work as well anymore.
Okay. Well, the point is that there was this skill that allowed you to over leverage yourself, and that people would use that skill to sometimes scam other players because they didn't put because the mechanics that allowed you to overextend yourself allowed you to create illusions of errors.
Well, to be clear, this addresses the margin scam flavor of the bait and switch scam. The bait and switch scam still exists. Like that guy had quantity 2, the minimum order quantity. That still exists. The only thing is that guy that has the quantity 2, now all that ISK that he's saying he put up, he actually put it up. So if you magically have that item, you can actually take him on it. So this scam still works, but it is way riskier now.
Right. Well, this is very interesting. So these changes are, as Fansui put it, instead of a brute force market, have changed it to become a more clever, better planned advantage. For people who are more clever or better planned, they can take advantage of it better than the way it was set up before. That did not make much sense to me either. Never mind. The point is they made some changes here to fix up the market to make it more to renew it. This market was built in 2002, 2003, before the game came out. It was modeled after stuff that was current in those days, and it's been needed to be upgraded for a long time now.
It was really, considering when it was built, it was very, very close to a proper real life market.
Yeah, and I think the 2 really big implications out of this is going to be margin trading disappearing, and new players who don't have as much liquid ISK and assets, they will find it more difficult to be competitive on a broader scale or bigger scale on the market. And some will argue that's not a bad thing, that's the way it should be, because you should have an advantage as a richer player. Some others will say that, but that's going to make it more difficult for new players to get into the game. So I don't know which is the correct way to go about it, but that's going to be one consequence. The other big implication is going to be those changes to modifications of orders, because that's going to really transform the way station traders have been trading, especially on the items such as Plex, etc. Because basically in the past, you would do your calculations on an item. You would look at, this is the buy order I will put up. I'm going to pay this much in broker fees, and then I will pay this much in broker fees and sales taxes when I sell it. Now you have to all of a sudden start calculating how many times might I have to modify this order to get it sold. Also depending on, is this price going to go up in price? Will it go down in price? What's the future holding in terms of supply and demand for this item? And take that into consideration when you calculate the potential profit you will get from it. So it becomes a lot more complicated to do station trading in that regard. And some items as they are at the moment will be completely impossible to trade at current margins.
Well, not impossible. It's just going to add volatility to those markets. But I think the important thing is that now you've got skin in the game. The whole point of coming into the game as a new player, because there's skin in the game, the whole conditions of winning or losing is a lot more like something you can sit down and think about and calculate. So the new player that wants to come in and play the market can still do so, but they have to actually assume some of the responsibilities for how they do it and what they do. If they do it well and smart, they will definitely be able to catch up a lot better than they could in the past.
So this tells me that this is the change that Aerith said. If anybody wanted me to mark the end of Eve, it's today. And this is probably, Aerith being a financial guy in CSM, the council that represents players. And this is probably something that got talked about a few weeks ago when that tweet came out. So we get another CSM player, Dunk Dinkle here, saying station trading is dead. Buying materials is much harder. The people with ISK and alts will ladder the market and block people. What do you guys, do you agree with that? Or do you disagree with that?
It's wrong. It's just fundamentally
Yeah,
wrong.
I
Because it's
disagree.
also going to mean that they are putting in more skin in the game. So they are also going to be susceptible to a lot more losses. So you can't just simplify that like that. That's just wrong.
But the losses for somebody who has 50 billion ISK versus somebody who has 10, somebody can sustain those losses better than the other.
Yeah, but it's the fact that the dumb game goes away. That means that that's going to benefit everyone, including the small and the medium players, because when they scale their operations, this scales a lot better in a healthy market. Whereas when you're up there, when you've plateaued, it gets slightly difficult. And if you add this level of risk, it's even more difficult, especially when you add volatility and diversification.
I think what Dunk is saying is that despite the fact that this addresses the brute force issues in general, they're still able to leapfrog the entire system with the sheer volume of resources and or ISK that they have, I think is the point that he's making. I'm not sure if I agree or disagree, but I think that's what he's saying.
Yeah, that's what he's trying to say. Using the ladder system, you basically, if you look at, take once again Plex as an example, because it's easy, because it has a very low margin window. So you basically have usually between 16 to 30,000 ISK in profit, and those are going to be changed by 1,000 ISK at a time. You can't put up an order anymore at 0.01 difference from the one below you or above you. So basically, you just have like 16 spots, kind of, if that makes sense, on the margin scale ladder where you still make a profit. So what Dunk is saying is that the rich and the powerful, or whatever, they will kind of take ownership of those spots. They will put up massive orders before anyone else. And if you try to put up an order on one of those spots, you're going to be behind the other guy because you put it up later. But that's just true as long as you have all of those spots taken on an item. The thing is, margins will have to increase with these changes both because of that, but also because it's going to be too difficult and too risky to have slim margins and trade in them, because you're always going to risk having to modify your orders, and then that's going to cost you more money or ISK, and the price could go up and down as well. So I think what we will see is a bit of stuttering in the beginning, and then the margins on those types of items where that's actually an issue, those will increase, and then we will go back to having a very competitive trading market again.
All I see is people being truly invested in their positions. I see marketeering being a valid profession. I see it requiring dedication and investment, and all of these are positive things.
Yeah, and the point is that when you're talking about something like modifications, when Dunk talks about the whole Chip King benefit, this is a real thing, and it is true. But it's also true that when you are Chip King, if you reach the point where you don't have any more modifications that you can afford without taking a hit, you are going to lose money. And that means that the volatility in the market, as it moves up and down, people can get in and compete with those big guys.
Okay, I want to actually go back to Ashtarothi and ask, I think I asked your opinion on the overall changes, but I don't remember what you said.
Yeah, and I actually got to go take my son out real quick. But before I do, I wanted to say that what I think is going to happen is that this is going to lower the barrier to entry. It's going to lower the skill floor, as it were, of market trading, because now there's going to be less people that are able to do, or people are able to do less shenanigans that you're not expecting or not understanding as an outside player.
Mm-hmm.
But the high end is also going to be pushed up. The skill ceiling of being a good market trader, the top of the top, is going to be potentially higher.
So somebody can become a good trader.
Yeah, the truly successful will be the truly skilled and knowledgeable and wise and prepared and researched.
So the advantage goes to people that know this game well, or people that know how a market functions.
Both.
Yeah.
And
Or
also
people that use third-party tools a lot.
Well, now those are going to be one and the same for the first time.
Yeah, what about third-party tools? How will they figure in on this?
They will become even more critical. Until now, third-party tools, everyone talks about their market spreadsheets and all that stuff, and they act like it's like some big shit. But in the end, it's really just tracking a bunch of numbers. And they will the kind of I've seen a lot of people's market spreadsheets. I've seen the numbers that they track, and I've seen that half of their data is irrelevant, and I've also seen that because the market is a brute force system, it works anyway, and then they believe that their system works and is functional, and I can't argue it because they get results. And now all of a sudden poor choices will actually be punishing, and I am much in favor of this.
Right.
It also increases the risk of doing trading now.
So
because
valuable
be more,
third-party tools now
yeah,
are the real
I mean,
value.
it's way more static, so you don't have as much flexibility. If you see a sudden change in the market, like, oh no, this item is going to drop in price now, you're going to have less opportunities, and it's going to cost you a lot more money or risk to try to get out of that item or whatever. So the market is going to become more static in that regard as well, because people will be less likely to take those kinds of risks in certain items. And when they do happen, it's more likely for people to actually stick with the previous set price of that item, as opposed to just lowering it, hoping that it will go back up again. So you might just see more natural market fluctuations that you might normally see in the markets. I don't know, but could be the case.
I think Stormrider here says, Stormrider Studio says, this may encourage people to list more locally, matching the price.
Yeah, potentially.
Yep.
So how's this going to affect the overall structure of the way economics works in EVE Online right now, where you have one massive trade hub, maybe a secondary trade hub, and that's kind of it?
This could
this
massively
may
benefit
actually, yeah. So this may turn out. So Dunk is saying that these big operators are going to jump all over the market and occupy every position. Well, all of a sudden, other regional markets just became, a very realistic thing. The Dixie market, all of these secondary markets, which have been ignored because there's no reason. Now it's a whole new platform for people that are getting squelched out of another one.
The only problem is, of course, the limitation in scale of diversification and secondary market building, right? Because we still have those limitations on how many orders can exist on one character. So people can only scale by adding more and more accounts. And it's just, this is one of those things that are not really necessarily healthy for the game, because it benefits a specific type of play style, which is basically multi-boxing. And I'm not a fan of that. I think we need to have the market depth on less characters and not more.
Still step in the right direction, though. I do agree with you that the ability to simply add more characters is still a brute force method and mechanism, and is still included and is still valuable. We haven't removed all the brute force, just a lot of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, so do you expect that people will become more regional, or will they still be metropolitan?
Oh, there's more room for regional markets now because there's less room in the big city.
Especially when you start adding things like the potential rebalance of things like fuel costs and usage on structures, and how easy or hard they are to destroy, how they balance into war decks, and how all of those costs to run structures, player structures, are going to have to be levied onto the activities and services, including markets. So there's just going to be a whole new ecosystem where space can actually start mattering again.
That's cool. Now, why is this going to hurt bots? Is it just more expensive? Or, I mean, because bots are just...
It rewards more thinking, and it also punishes repetitive action.
Because you have to predict where a price is going to be so that you position yourself initially in the best place, as opposed to incrementally chasing something.
But I mean, that bots do that as well. It's not like they
Okay,
put up a frigate for
harder,
50 million. But the big thing is the incremental decreases or increases, because they do that out of automation. So basically, they update those orders in order to always be on the top of the queue to have the orders sold. And doing that on automation is going to cost you a ton of ISK due to the modified entries. Like I mentioned in the blog, you have a few selected who do like 100 plus modifications on one single order. That's going to be, I mean, you're going to lose ISK, tons of ISK doing that. And that's the bot behavior. So that's going to be completely removed.
Well, the benefit of the bots is that they never sleep. The benefit of the bots is that they perform repetitive actions that make your wrist tired. And those aspects of managing your market positions are being removed. So the primary benefit of bots is being removed. These are decisions that you have to think about and make, and executing those decisions in terms of updating orders is not going to be the onerous task anymore. Your wrist will thank you.
Your wrist will thank you.
One thing that came to me as well when we're talking about it on the TIS Discord is that lower broker fees are going to have an even bigger impact now on the modification costs of orders. So what we have at the moment is in the Forge, we have Jita 44, which is the main trade hub. You have the vast majority of items are still being actively traded within that station. And then you have the TTT, the Keep Stalling Perimeter, that has a very low broker fee, which is mainly used for trading in the service items, Plex, multiple pilot training certificates, extractors, etc. I think due to the increased cost of when you modify your order, I think some of the high volume items that people tend to station trade in, I think there's an increased incentive to actually move those items to being traded at perimeter instead, because you're going to have lower costs of making the actual modifications of the orders. As it is now, once you put your order up, the extra cost of adjusting your order is completely neglectable. But in this new system, with these changes, it's going to make one hell of a difference. So I know that the Nosec people will love this, because Arif, as he was mentioned before, he wants everything to be moved gradually into that keep style. So you have even Vex and AV issues and damage controls, all that kind of stuff being traded in that station. I think this might be something that slowly moves some of those items to being traded in perimeter instead of Jita 44.
And that is because you're saying that is because the competition and the pricing will get so rough in Jita that it will make people just want to leave because they can't make any money in Jita.
No, it's because of the modifying the price on a sell order, buy order in Jita 44 is going to be so much more expensive than in perimeter. It was something you could completely neglect in the past. So what a lot of people would do for more pricey items is that they would put up a buy order in perimeter, and then they would sell the item still in Jita 44, because the main costs that would cut into your profit margins was the broker fees and the sales taxes. And once you put up that order, you could completely neglect the cost of changing the order. That's not going to be the case anymore. You have to account for changing the order as well if you want to have it sold within a certain time frame. So that could be one of the reasons as to why more items could be moved into perimeter. And then on top of that, yes, you could have more competition as well, causing people to find other markets where they could compete more easily. But that's a different thing.
I'm not sure I understand why, but I'll take your word for it.
Sourcing is going to change. I mean, we could address what Dunk has been saying in chat, because he said a bunch, and I think Caleb wants to take it on. Would you care to address that?
It's just annoying to listen to this endless.
Let's say what he's saying first, so that people that are listening.
Let's put his position out there.
It's how it slows down markets, and in part he's right. But the point is that the market has been wrong because people have not been actually bidding the right bidding war. They've just been using this queue jumping to get the thing at the price that they want, right? So when he's talking about things like bulk, right, he's saying, oh, someone can't now go in and buy a huge amount of ore like they could in the past. Well, they can, but they can't use the queuing to actually get ahead and get it at the cheap, low cost. They have to pay premium if they want it now.
Exactly. If you want it now, you're going to buy it off someone's sell order. If you want it, so right now, buy orders are too easy to use. This will make it harder. You have to actually want a position in an item long term to put up and maintain a buy order. You have to put all the money down for it. You have to say, I really want this thing. I have to maintain a stockpile, or I want to move it. I want to do something. You don't just get something now with a buy order because you want it.
That is
if you want it now, you get it off a sell order.
Well, that's interesting because we didn't put enough emphasis on that. The fact that they're changing the margin trading skill means you can no longer over leverage yourself.
And this is there's a flip side that's really an upside to this. This will mean, Dunk says, well, this will force people out of Jita because the chip kings will dominate the market. That's fundamentally a good thing because that will boost arbitrage tremendously because people will not go in there and try to compete with their micro stacks. Instead, they will sell them at range to people that will actually pay a premium for getting that service outside of Jita. And Jita will still be competitive and still be able to have a price that is competitive to the rest of the world, depending on whether or not it's a seller's or buyer's market, right? So this is all good. It's just that Dunk does not really fundamentally understand how this shit works.
No, I don't know if he doesn't do that. I think
this is turning marketeering into a legitimate professional service.
It used to be that as well in the past. I almost take personal offense to that. But it's not like I've been a clueless bot myself doing station trading. Just for clarification.
I think you would agree then that this turns it more into a legitimate service than it ever was before.
Yeah, it does. It does. So my second point is I am one of those guys who do really, really short-term, often spontaneous and opportunistic trading. So my game doing trading is basically to find items that I can go in and out of really fast and make sure that I'm on top. So I have the top buy order and I have the top sell order. And then I will keep on bashing that one until I get bored, too drunk, or I don't make money anymore.
I just want to take a moment. So we've been disagreeing with Dunk, but I want to make 1,000% sure that there's no ad hominem attacks here. Dunk is a smart fucking dude.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Dunk is a really smart dude, and he knows what he's talking about. We happen to disagree with him today on this issue, but I would certainly never dismiss what he says out of hand.
It's all right.
To be very, very clear.
We'll take that on in a minute, but I want Amar to finish what he was saying.
Yeah.
If you could.
So one thing that's very notable about this completely screws me over. Doing it that way is not going to be the way to go forward. I can't trade that way anymore. I'm going to have to adapt, and I'm going to have to take on an approach that is more like long-term trading, basically, where you have to figure out what are the fluctuations of the market, what's going to be the potential high and lows, what's the macroeconomics like, how is that going to affect the price of this item before I decide to go into it. So my style of doing station trading is going to be very, very different going forward because you can't do it the way they will change it with the modified fees and all that stuff. So basically what it does is that it nerfs, you could say, the station traders that are very autistic in being on top of their orders, and it actually promotes people who tend to invest and trade more long-term or mid-term.
Okay. Also, in real life, Dow Jones is down 3-4% on news of broker change. I'm just kidding here. Broker relations changing. No, but it's funny that this comes out and then the stock market takes a dip in real life. I wonder.
But in Dunk's defense, I mean, he's correct in one aspect that a lot of industry guys these days, they don't tend to do as much station trading. So basically, they tend to go onto the market. They want to, of course, buy stuff as cheap as possible to continue the manufacturing, often using buy orders as it is now. But they don't expect, I mean, we have that just mentioned. If you want it now, immediately, as soon as possible, you're going to have to pay a premium for it going forward. So yeah, it's going to be more costly for those kinds of industry guys who come onto the market, who want to quickly buy something in order to continue their producing. So in that regard, he is correct that it will become more expensive for those kinds of guys who do trading like that.
But it makes planning more valuable, and it makes trading the domain of marketeers, and it makes industry, the domain of industrialists. It separates these things out.
That's a good thing. Any way you look at it, I think the more specialized you can become in your profession and the deeper the gameplay, the better. The more rewarding it is for people who want to do that.
And you won't see a lot of those old bait and switch things with the composites in baskets and things like that, where you know that a certain fit is being used in a certain way, and then you buy out the thing that is currently undersupplied and relisted at a massive premium, because now these things are going to be more correctly price found and balanced, and you're going to have a market depth that actually reflects these things. So it's going to be a lot less abusive than in the past.
Okay. All right, let's review what changes are happening for people who joined a bit late. There are basically 3 changes, and then we can actually talk about how they're going to implement them. I don't know how interesting that is, but the first thing they're going to do is introduce a new change order minimum amount. And it'll be 4 digits from the lead digit. That's how I think of it. So you can't change any zeros after the 4th digit. So if you have an item worth $1 million ISK, you have to change it at 1,000 at a time. You can't change it at 1 cent anymore, or 1 ISK anymore, or any of that kind of stuff. Okay, the second change is there is a tax increase on all player structures, Upwell structures, from 0% to 1%. So no more 0% tax havens. And half of that 1%, so basically 0.5% tax, will now drain out of the game as an NPC tax. So even if you have your tax rate at 3%, you're only getting 2.5% from now on.
No, that's not correct though.
That isn't?
It's half. No, it's half of the percentage you set. So if you do 3%, it's going to be 1.5 that goes to NPC.
That's much bigger than I thought. Oh, that's great. That's going to really hit Tranquility Trading Center hard, and all those player characters that have got 3% up on their structures.
I feel like this is also going to
hard.
lead to this is also going to lead to social connections for getting the stuff that you need. Like sometimes you're going to want to skip the market. It's like, maybe I could trade with my buddy. Maybe he has what I need. Maybe I could borrow it. Maybe I could trade it. This is going to diversify the transfer of items and goods and currency. Like I like almost everything about this.
Yeah.
I would just like to let you know that. Sorry.
Cable, go ahead real quick.
I would just like to let you know that Billy promised the tax would never go above 0.3. Now it's going to go to 1.
Okay, so he delivered. The last change on here is really interesting, because it's what's not written that's interesting. And that is that there is a realist fee now. That's a new formula that's higher. So it's going to cost you a lot more to relist. So you're going to change orders slower, which means you're going to have to predict better in order to maximize your profits. If you predict poorly, you'll lose money. If you change too often, you will lose money. So now you got to be a bit better at marketing. And hold on. Let me just get through these changes. The margin trading skill has been changed. Now it will reduce the fee for relisting or changing or modifying your orders. So you can reduce it by 50% to 75%, depending on your skill level. And the last thing is, the thing that you can't see on this is, because the advanced broker relations skill has changed, that means, correct me if I'm wrong, Ian, you can no longer over leverage yourself like you used to.
It increases the value of ISK in cost to actually acquire it. But the interesting thing is that this is not in a vacuum, right? We're looking at things like depletion of minerals. We're looking at a huge rebalance thing coming in when it comes to resources. We are also potentially looking at major changes coming to stuff like industry and to fuel consumption in the game. So when these things start happening, the whole ecosystem will go back to being proper PvP. This is what Fonsui is pointing out with the whole social interactions value and markets and all of the things that we used to have in the past before the game got stagnant and flat. All of this will come back. And I know that Dunk might not like that, but that's what makes this game fun.
Yeah, that was Cable weeing in the background there.
Yeah, I'm totally okay with like the winds changing and the people who are in power and able to make money today doing this can't anymore, and a whole new group of people gaining that ability or something being eliminated or whatever. Like, I don't care as long as it leads to a healthy game that attracts more people tomorrow that want to stay.
Mm-hmm.
Like a game that people want to play every day is all that I care about, and how similar it is to the game that we play today is not a valuable comparison to me.
All right. Well, listen, and this is not necessarily about Dunk, but it is actually necessarily about Dunk. Let's not be too tough on him because he's not able to talk. Otherwise, he'd be representing himself here in a quicker fashion. So we will have more shows on this, and maybe we'll get Dunk on to talk about it and his objections to it. Again, he is a CSM member, but he is also the logistics master for Brave, I believe, or close to it. And he deals a lot in high volume trading for his guys. Most of the stuff is for his guys. And he's a good guy with strong ideas. And it's nice to see that, not everybody's embracing these changes this way, because you guys all seem kind of uniform, which is very interesting. It tells me that you guys that play this market for the profit feel pretty good about this.
Because it adds value to the type of specialization, right? It doesn't matter if you are a miner or a market guy or an industrialist. If you bring back these, call it bottlenecks or challenges to your gameplay, it makes your speciality worth something again.
Yeah.
And this is what's been destroyed. And I know that people like Dunk that see these things say, oh, it's more tedium. No, it's not. It's actually value to the people that like that gameplay.
Well, what do you say to people? I don't know if this is Dunk, but what if you say to people that like this game is about PvP? Everything is supposed to be just making PvP easier.
This is fundamentally PvP. It's just not the PvP that goes on in a ship versus another ship. It's all the fundamentals that is underneath those ships. What makes
it's competition. It's smart and skilled competition, 100%. But even beyond that, even if it wasn't. Even if that was irrelevant, which it's not, it is relevant. But even if it wasn't, the fact that the market must be healthy, the economy must simply make sense. It has to work. There's a reason why things are stagnating, and it starts with the blood. And it has been stagnant for entirely too long.
You mean metaphorically, the blood?
Yeah. The market is the lifeblood of New Eden, of this entire game. The market is how we represent our effort and how we, trade the effort for goods and services, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is how we relate to each other in terms of the effort that we put into the game. And there is a game in and of itself in that interaction, and that is marketeering, and it has value, but that still has to be healthy for the rest of the game to work and not stagnate. And that is one, not the, but one of the reasons why we see the stagnation that we are seeing now.
Okay, so to sum it up, I just want to get my head around it. The changes that they have made make being nimble more expensive. So you have to be better at predicting what something is actually worth, what it's going to cost, and it's going to put a premium on desperation, which it always has, but it'll put an even bigger premium on desperation.
Yeah, all marketers are just getting giant boots to wear now.
Yeah, I should also make clear my own position in this. So I'm pretty, I'm pretty knowledgeable about how the market functions. I'm not going to act like I'm a brilliant genius or anything, but like I know a thing or two, and I'm able to make predictions, and they tend to work out. But these changes are more likely than not going to freeze me out of marketeering, because it's not a profession. It's not the profession I want to go into, and I don't know how much I want to focus on it. So I'll still be able to use the market as a consumer, but it'll be harder for me personally to participate in the profiteering part of it. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with being forced out of that silo unless I want to dedicate my time to it.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to make that position clear, because that, I'm
It's not
not
like
just
you're
coming from the
benefiting.
position. Exactly. It's not like I'm benefiting. I'm actually going to most likely lose in the long run because of this. But that doesn't affect, my opinion of this in terms of the health of the game.
I would just like to add to that as well, from you just mentioned, because it does sound like we all think it's a good change and it's in the right direction. It is worth noting that there are some negatives coming out of this as well. The markets could become more stagnant in that they will have less people doing marketeering, less orders, less competition potentially, if people do find this to be too complex and some items just don't become worth doing. The complexity itself could also be a threshold for people to get into it. So you could have. I mean, at the same time, you're gonna have some people who do trading today. They do it because it is relatively simple to do, and they will stop doing it. In turn, you might have others to come in and replace them. But for new player, it's going to be more complex to get into the trading, especially when they remove the margin trading as well, because that made you more competitive as a new player when you don't have hundreds of billions in liquid ISK that you can just throw into buy orders and don't worry about it. The same goes for, and it's also worth noting the social aspect that Fonsu was mentioning before. What a lot of people tend to do today, when they simplify the production stuff, the industry, a lot of people felt it more easy to produce their own stuff, where you used to have very dedicated industry guys who did manufacturing. You can say the same thing the other way around, where you have a lot of really good industry guys who don't normally do a lot of trading, but it's still fairly easy for them to put up a buy order or a sell order and quickly fill their needs for resources or to move the stuff they produce. All of a sudden, it might just be worthwhile to broker some deals with some miners per se, so you don't have to put up those buy orders yourself. You know that you're going to get a good price from the miners directly, or sell wholesale through contracts to a corporation that needs PvP ships. So there's some interesting stuff that could come out of this as well, in terms of interactions between pilots and different professions as well,
Yeah.
where you
Sure.
rely more on other people being specialists.
Here's a
I think
question.
that.
Go
Okay,
ahead,
go
Ash.
ahead, and then I'll.
Okay. Here's a question. Well, this question we might know the answer to. This is from Azazel. But for nullsec people who just want to buy this, will make things more difficult. That's more of an answer than a question. But here,
Yeah. So, essentially, the market is the great equalizer. Everything boils down to ISK. That's the purpose of ISK. That's why it's in the game. So the market is there to create a situation in which stuff can be, transferred from one player to another in a logical, rational manner. But the problem is that it's the great equalizer, but it should be the last ditch effort. The market should be the last way. You should try to find better ways and other ways to either obtain or transfer these things. But it's when nothing else works, now you can use the market, unless you specialize in it, unless you're the market guy.
okay, here's the question I was looking for. Does this change even matter to small-time local guy in Heck or Dodixie or Rennes?
It does,
Probably
because
helps them.
it benefits
No.
it benefits
I
their
mean, yeah.
arbitrage, right? It's going to make the whole value system better. Everyone can find their niche, and their local environment is going to matter. It's going to potentially be the biggest redistribution rebalancing ever, because they're doing it properly from the bottom and not this weird attempt of top-down thinking, right? This is something that can be used by the player.
Ash, do you agree with that? You're about to jump in there, it sounded like.
I agree with that. What I was saying is that with that, the market being kind of cooled off and everything in various different places, then having those secondary markets where people aren't going to compete with you and aren't going to force you to have to relist over and over and over again in order to maintain your market position, that will be stronger. Because think about it this way: the more you have to touch your market, the more you have to touch your orders, that's just throwing away money. That's wasted cost. And so if you work in a market that requires less touching of it, then you are operating on a more efficient level.
Yeah, it's gonna cost you more to get stuff in JITA, even on a buy order, than it would anywhere else. Other places, if you can, that's the thing. If you can get it on a buy order somewhere else, it'll be cheaper than getting it on a buy order in JITA. So what we're gonna have to see is people figuring this out slowly over time, because right away it's not gonna happen. But slowly people will realize, oh, I can sell my stuff here more easily, or people will realize, oh, I can buy this stuff here more easily, and then we'll start seeing the bodegas sprouting up, and then they're going to upgrade into supermarkets and super
Now,
and whatnot.
I imagine that they're going to put in with a new mineral system, right? I don't know if it's just minerals that they're going to be affecting. I think they're going to affect everything. There's going to be shortages, or at least diversity in plentifulness of a thing all over the map. So something might be more plentiful in the south, not in the north. So you're going to find it priced differently in the south than it would be in the north. And these changes, how do they affect that landscape of dynamic and self-regulating minerals and stuff out there?
Massive.
Well, if I'm running Serpentis sites,
sorry, let's go Caleb first and then Ash.
It's going to improve the incentive to do deals, do bigger deals and bulk stuff. And of course, arbitrage is going to be huge. You're going to get actual movement and differences between areas. So you're going to get balance of payment differences between regions, between systems. That is going to benefit everyone down the whole trickle down thing. This is a trickle down economic.
Oh, you got cut out there. Caleb, you got cut. All right.
You take it.
Wait, I think you got cut off when you started talking about trickle down.
That's what this will end up being. It's going to be trickle down. Your work and your specialization is going to matter locally and personally and group focus wise. Everything. It's about the supply chain. All this value that's potentially going to come from the big guys is going to trickle down all along the whole supply chain again.
All right, Ash.
So if I am in Serpentis space and I am getting Serpentis modules, faction and dead space, it is now even more valuable to me to just sell it locally in Dodixie rather than bring it into JITA in order to deal with all of the stuff that involves. So I would imagine that you'll see regional markets that support the things that are harvested in that local area.
And in that location, the price will be rather low compared to actually shipping it to JITA to then sell it to people that might need it and don't have local access. So again, this is arbitrage boost galore all the way.
Absolutely. Stuff is going to come from where it comes from, and it's going to cost based on that.
Well, I think if you put those two things together, right, with scarcity or more landscape to goods and services, and you put a more expensive and slower mechanism to trade, that those two things together are really going to, I think, influence each other. In other words, I think these changes here will actually make the coming changes of scarcity even more powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Just as the when the ore was removed from the belts, and everyone laughed and was like, "Ha! We don't use those belts. Hit us hard." So they did, and they're not laughing anymore. So yeah, all of these things synergize, and what they're doing is they are burning the economy down to the ground, so they can do it all over again because they want Eve forever.
And if you think of something being potentially overstocked in JITA, right? Let's say that some modules or hulls are extremely oversupplied there, right? Because the new competition model is going to actually take the price down to a point where then actual arbitrage and shipping that out to create service and convenience is going to be a valid thing to do again.
Yeah, I think, did you mean anoms or belts when you're? Fonsway.
The December changed what
The
ore was
first-
spawning in the belts,
In the
and then
belts.
everybody was
Very,
like,
very
"Who
first
cares?
change.
Nobody mines any of the belts. It's fine. We all mine anomalies." So then, when the
Yep.
anomaly change happened, there was no belts to fall back to because that change had already happened.
Got
That's
it.
what I was just saying in the comments, which is that this market change is very, very similar to the ore change, in the fact that so late last
That's
year,
the
what
point I
CCP
was
did
making.
was cut off your escape route, right?
Yeah,
So they
right.
knew exactly what our behavior was going to be when these bigger changes happened. So they preemptively cut the knees off of those secondary things. And when those things happened, we were like, psh, whatever. We
Mhm.
don't care. I'll just move to the Tranquility Trade Tower. I'll just mine in anomalies. So that way, when the CCP was like, okay, and now Tranquility Trade Tower has tax, and now anomalies suck. Then it was like, well, but oh, shoot.
Well, and it's interesting because that's the psychology of that is it keeps people from being nerfed down to hell, right? Like they may actually not feel like CCP just keeps punishing me if they keep cutting off where I'm running to after they make a change.
Right.
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 They're punishing everyone. It's just raining down equally on all of us.
Well,
Yeah.
no, what he's saying
If they
is that
blow up the
like,
bridge behind me, then they're not. Well, go ahead. What were you gonna say?
I was just gonna say, like, you know, if my gameplay gets nerfed, and then I adjust, and then that gameplay gets nerfed, and I adjust, eventually I'm going to feel targeted. But if they nerf where I'm going to go next, then when they nerf the thing that I'm doing, I don't even evaluate that other thing because it's already been taken out of the puzzle. So I'm not being targeted by that. I have to move on to the third thing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Right.
Next level
It's
thinking.
reducing the number of blows that people have to weather.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it doesn't feel so punitive over, it's like everything I'm trying to do, they just keep screwing up. So it's kind of an interesting little psychology if they're doing that. Like they're making, but here's the thing, that could be true, but these changes are going to take a long time to actually go into effect. They're going to take at least 90 days for the first modification. First, when this thing goes in, it's not going until next month. When it goes in, the orders that are up, I think they're still, no, they basically get affected by the new taxes when they make their first change. And if nobody makes a change to it, which is very likely, it has 90 days to sit there at its old pricing, basically. And then there was something else. Wasn't it like buy orders?
There's the risk of the equivalent of the wall of Plex, right? You could actually expect to see something
Not
similar.
many people know the wall of
that want
Plex
to-
story.
No. But it's basically
anyway.
that if you put anything in now before the changes come into effect, you're basically going to be able to have, say, buy orders set at gearing of ×5, right? So if you want to get in on that market, get in now.
Right. Essentially,
It's going to take
if-
some time for this to all switch over to
Right.
the new system.
Essentially, once it switches over, new orders have to follow the new rules. But if you establish yourself now, then you get to establish yourself with the old rules, and that carries into the new rules, which
And
gives
that
you an
affects-
advantage for a period of time.
Yeah, and it also creates the buffer from the potential of the bottom falling out of the market, because anyone that does this now will then become the buffer that is needed to avoid a market depth lapse.
I think the bottom line is this is going to take some time to kick in, at least 90 days for it to really start to be felt. Not at least, but around 90 days. And I'm wondering if they're making these changes now because other changes are going to be announced at FanFest that will also, be compatible with these changes, like mineral changes and scarcity and stuff.
At the pace that we are seeing these things happen, I would say it's safe to say that by FanFest, we will find out at least one new thing that's going to change everything.
Right.
And my bet is that it's going to be about fuel consumption and industry changes. And they might actually figure out how to fix the infinite industry slots problem, because that is just dumb. And should
That's
never
got to be
done.
coming, right? Like that's a glaring error, or not error, but problem. So I think what they're doing here is saying, because I was wondering why wouldn't they leave some of this stuff for FanFest? But I think what they're doing is this has to kind of get announced, get kicked in, and then by the time the other stuff comes, it'll be timed better. That might be just something, but the the overall point, is there an
Well-
advantage to getting into the market right now before these tax changes happen?
So to be clear, let's assume for a second that the changes that are coming at FanFest are practical changes, capital changes, like how things work. Well, any change like that is going to require adjustment. And so the changes that they're doing right now is changing our ability to adjust. If suddenly we have to change all of our ships, then ore changes are going to suppress our ability to do that rapidly. If we're going to have to change doctrines, then our ability to manipulate the market and move things back and forth is going to impact that. So what they're doing is they're making it so that whenever they make the practical change that requires an adjustment in what we have and what we use, we're actually, that transfer over isn't as trivial as it would have been.
All the changes that they've been making lately add up to one essential philosophy, and it is that having stuff matters, and having ISK matters less.
Yeah.
Still required, still necessary, but ISK is not as important as it once was. Having the stuff when and where you need it is the important thing.
So what's the smart move right now to take advantage of these changes that really will be fully kicked in 6 months?
I would like to propose that we stop referring to it as a margin trading change. It's really a replacement.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like when we say margin trading skill is being changed,
Adjusted,
that implies that like it's being nerfed or something
No.
like that. No, it's basically the margin trading skill is effectively being destroyed. It doesn't exist. That functionality doesn't happen. But now you will have a new skill at the same level as the previous one that does a totally different thing.
Totally different thing, though. And that's important because that means margin trading is gone. And that's what's not
Gone and
in
done.
here. And that was a big, big deal for some people.
And it's also the upside to the downside that Von Trui just mentioned, right? Yes, ISK is being less valuable, but only
that's an upside, Caleb. That's an upside.
Well, if they're dead in the wallet, it's worthless, right? But if they are out working on your market as a market trader, they're not worthless. They're actually more valuable than they were before.
Okay, another byproduct is the market trading order count. The skills that affect that, are they now more valuable? Should you get wholesaler or tycoon now?
Yes.
No, there's no difference.
There's
There
no.
is.
So
Okay,
now
so no- I hear
your money
no
is your
difference in
limiter
yes.
more than your order slots. That's the whole point.
I cut you off. Sorry. Say it again.
Your money is your limiter more than your order slots now. Like, if you want to buy something, you have to really, really want to buy it. And if you really, really want to buy it, you're going to buy it. And people are not going to be so ready to just fill their order slots with orders everywhere. They're going to be careful about it. Only the biggest traders are going to want to spread out as much as possible. So they will.
So
I
this
would
is
argue that the more orders you have, the more positions you can maintain. If anything, it's going to make having those skills increase in value. That which was good before when it comes to these skills will be still good, I guess is what I'd say.
But there's
You're right.
no real difference. It's either going to be good. It's going to be the same thing. So amount of skills, that's not going to be a big thing.
Yeah.
One thing that people probably want to look at is if they are sitting on a large stockpile of those types of items that are going to be completely nerfed due to the modification changes, the changes to relisting your orders and the cost associated with it. Those stockpiles might be a bit iffy going forward. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to give any direct tips on what you should be looking at, but that's well worth taking into conconsideration.
well, walk me through a scenario.
What I think Ash is talking about is the fact that if you increase things like arbitrage and interregional trading and stuff like that, your market orders are suddenly worth more than they were in the past. If you are station trading in one location, they are potentially worth less because of this change. So both is true.
Walk me through an example, Amar.
Well, we can use Plex again, I guess.
Yeah.
So up until the point where these changes are put in place, you can keep on trading Plex at current margins, and you're not going to be for better or worse of it. After this hits, the margins will change completely, and the margins you currently have on those Plex prices, if you're actively trading them or have been actively trading them, you can't do the same thing after, what was it, 10th of March or something? So it might be worthwhile looking at offloading that because you don't know what you're going to end up with after it. You do know for sure that in order to successfully station trade with those items short term, you would need to have a much larger margin in order to compensate for modifying the orders and relisting them. So if you don't want to take that risk of potentially losing money on items such as those, the same could be said for like any high volume traded item really that has really small margins. So I think probably VNIs used to be one of those items. You would have perhaps 1 million profit on those margins. There was a lot of competition, so you had to continuously update those orders in order to have a reasonable chance of selling them before the price changed and you would actually lose money. Plex is still the best example of it. So yeah, it could be well worth looking over that kind of stuff.
There's just a small problem when you're using Plex. The fact that Plex is infinitely fungible and same price everywhere. There's no price difference because we have the vault, right? So using that as an example shifts everything into station trading only. But when you're talking about things like interregional differences and arbitrage and supply side dealing and all of that stuff, right? When you're using your ISK for an actual service, especially on the buy orders market, because people are really into convenience, then the market order is going to be infinitely valuable if you use it like that.
Yeah, but that's not what I was addressing. I'm just trying to address what are you looking for what could you be doing right now in order to take advantage of what's going to happen or get out ahead. So it's not the implications going forward of whatever value we might have in the buy orders, just to clarify.
You mentioned something interesting, Caleb. You mentioned Plex, and I hadn't considered this. So because Plex has no locational attribute, it doesn't exist in any place. In other words, if I want to make Plex appear on a given market, I just have to get a tune there, and then the Plex appears there. So is this going to make Plex markets begin to crop up in random places?
Well, that's very likely because that is the benefit of this, right? This is related to what I said about something that's big in supply in one single location, actually being potentially oversupplied, has to actually be distributed out to secondary hubs and locations to actually still make sure that you actually sell it. Because if you are in the Plex market, you are almost always competing with a huge market depth of actual assets available, right? So you will benefit from distributing that out so you can sell it at a small markup instead of trying to compete.
And I see. Yeah, exactly. So that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that Plex is going to be the icebreaker. Plex is going to be what establishes these smaller markets that are outside of JITA because it's the easiest thing to move. It doesn't have to move at all. And then once you have a people that but you have to physically go there to make the Plex appear there. You don't have to bring the Plex, but you do have to go there. And when you're there, you might notice there's other things on the market. And then all of a sudden, this is how that new hub develops.
Yeah, it's also the best probe. It's the best way of finding out how many people are actually available in that potentially new market. So as a market trader, it's really, really interesting because you can basically go out and you can seed a number of Plex. And as they sell, you will basically be able to say,
I like that
this is the potential. It's the ISK activity of this local region. Then I can expect to put this many of buy orders up for these types of things that I can see is kind of in supply and I want to arbitrage. So this is just boosting everything when it comes to smart markets.
It's also worth noting that it goes both ways. So just the same that you can go physically into any market and bring your Plex with you, that's the way people buy Plex as well. They use often an alt in JITA, even though the main is still somewhere out in nullsec or whatever, and then they remotely activate it. So it goes both ways, but it's still an interesting concept, and I think that could very well be the case that Fosui suggested.
Yeah, I mean, the idea to me is that people are going to take up all of the Plex positions in the Forge. That's going to happen. Then people are going to take up all the Plex positions in the Citadel and Lone Track, etc., so on and so forth. And why? Because when all the positions in the Forge are taken up, that our market is divided regionally. That's how the system works. And sooner or later, people are going to want to be able to both sell and buy their Plex, and they're going to want to not compete. And of all the items in the entire game that get traded, Plex is the only one that never, ever, ever has to be moved in any direction ever.
You also have injectors. But, yeah.
Injectors have to be moved one way. They don't have to be moved the other way. Plex can be pulled and moved anywhere. But once I buy an injector, I can only use it or move it if I want to sell it. So Plex can literally be made to appear anywhere for free.
And remember, now we might actually get some serious volatility into the Plex market, because now when prices changes, when there's sales, when there's utility improvement, something that makes Plex worth more or less, depending on whether there's more whales coming into the game or less, all of these things will now be reflected. And that means that all those positions that you see in Jita today are going to be sensitive to that, because if they've already done all their manipulations and modified their order, so they're no longer making a profit, they have to stop modifying. Otherwise, they're taking a loss.
But there'll also be lag, regional lag, or I guess people not logging in lag. So some people will be able to react faster and snatch up some things that are undervalued because something just changed, because the guy that put up the order did it at a time when...
I've done the world tour, and all of a sudden world tours are going to become a lot more valuable.
What's the world tour?
A change happens and you go and snap up all the orders that are untended and not in areas that people visit.
Right. It just feels like those will be, if stuff is more diversified. Yeah, I don't know, maybe. Because right now it's kind of like you buy everything and you really just kind of buy it in Jita. Or you might buy it in Amar. There's some people who play there. And that's kind of it. So when something changes, you really need to go to those two centers and buy up everything there as quickly as possible. And then it's over, because there was nothing being sold out there in Heck, in Dodixie, or anywhere else.
This is where you can start looking at things like structure owners can start playing around with the services that they are actually offering, right? So they might be taking a loss or doing loss leader on, say, their overall broker tax, right? And then they put everything else service-wise up at a level that then gives them their income stream, right? So all of these things and all of these shenanigans are just going to change into a much more cerebral player versus player market.
Every corner that we look in, every time we examine another aspect of this change, I like it more. And it's important to note that there are going to be losers in this. There will in fact be losers, and there will be pain in the transition, and things will not necessarily be as easy as they were before. But I like the game that this creates. I really, really do. Every single time I think about the game that is created by these changes, I like almost everything about it.
Well, I'm with Caleb in strong agreement that the more professionalized you become about a certain form of gameplay, the better it is for people who were really relegated for the last few years, I think since 2011, to secondary professions. And I'd like
because
to
that was what made it so fun, right?
Yeah.
I would have to make a group with specific people that had specific skill sets, because I couldn't know everything about everything. There would be one guy doing capital components. There would be one guy doing invention. There would be
100%,
one guy.
100%.
All of these things, right? Because I could not keep up. I wouldn't know I would know what the market was doing, but I wouldn't know exactly how that impacted that kind of activity, right? So I would always go to my guy that knew how to do this and say, so can we figure out some shenanigans? I might actually be able to get you some cheap titanium, or could you give me a bulk order of 500 because I might actually have someone delivering or needed to be delivered to a null entity. All of these things are coming back. It's all the meta market stuff that was killed over the last fucking 10 years. And it completely died with the casinos, because nothing could compete with that. No market guy, no specialist, nothing. It was just printing money out of thin air.
Well, I like that it's not just being able to do it yourself, but it's the relationships with other marketers and understanding what they're doing. That knowledge is beneficial, because you can say, yeah, that price is too high, that price is too low, or whatever. And so it's not, again, the knowing the marketplace is not just your own position, but it's everybody else's position in relationship to yours, and your political relationships with those other marketers.
We're seeing professional identities reemerge with real meaning. I have heard people call themselves market traders and industrialists, and miners and whatever, over the past, couple years or whatever. And most of the people who call themselves those things are really, really not. They engage in that activity. They don't know anything about it, but it's easy to brute force, so they do it. And slowly but surely, we are seeing professional identities develop, and we're going to see more successful and less successful people. And that success is going to be determined by their knowledge and understanding and not just raw effort.
Yeah, so the Eclectic Works, I think he says, or she says, the reason for these changes is because people aren't penalized for playing the 0.01 ISK wars. That's really what it is.
I mean, that's a valid point. It's one aspect of this.
It is, but
sure.
I think it's a little simplistic too, because yes, that's true. But those wars weren't being penalized. But I think, isn't it more than just that?
Yeah,
Oh, no,
that's very reduction. It's accurate, but reductionistic. It's only one.
There's nothing wrong about that, except that is the entirety of it.
There's another added
Well, it's
part.
not. I mean, that's simplified as well. It's not just about 0.01 ISK wars. Trading has been a lot more since then, but that aspect of trading has become a very dominant factor, and it's especially obvious in the perimeter plex trading, for example. So it's good that they do something about it. Sorry, Misu, by the way.
All good. Yeah, but perimeter plex trading now they added the IS sync to it.
Mm-hmm.
They were pulling billions in taxes out of that on 0.4%. Now it's going up to 1%. It's at 0.5. Now it's going up by double, and 0.5 of that is going to NPCs. So that's billions of ISK that were being taken out and taken into, or I would say, the alliances in nullsec, and now it's evaporating.
Which is good.
Yeah, I want to see the world that this creates.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, that part, at least for perimeter. Now it changes how plex trading works in other structures around HiSec.
Mm-hmm.
Because the profit margins
Who's saying the other day the chaos era is over?
I asked Hilmar, I said, is the chaos era over, when I was in Las Vegas in that interview?
I think the really interesting part is that it completely boosts player-owned structures.
Hold on.
The whole ecosystem being shifted to that, and that's going to make so much difference in the game.
His answer to the chaos era being over was, if I told you it wouldn't be a chaos era. Wanted to get to the punchline. Okay, we're going to wrap up. There's a lot more to talk about this, and it's not going to be worked out in the first day. This is just hours after it's been announced. I think it was really only 6 hours ago. The marketeers that hang around that you've listened to are pretty positive on this. However, it seems like the logistic guys that basically use the market to get equipment for their guys, like Dunk Dinkle as an example of that, seem to think this is a bad change. It's going to wreck marketing the way it is now. So there are some disagreements.
The way it is now, we're happy about that.
Yeah, and you'll see that this will get flushed out more. We'll continue to talk about this all day long at Talking in Stations. But probably, Ash, are you going to be streaming?
Just went live.
You did? Okay, so we're going to raid over to Ash's place.
Ash ain't stupid.
No.
What?
No, he was going to do it anyway. But are you going to continue to discuss this, Ash, or are you going to do other
Yeah,
things?
we'll just. I figure I'll just, because you need to head out. I'll just hang out here for at least a little bit longer and dink around a little bit, and then
All right, cool.
I don't know. Maybe I'll take a pause before I go into my daily routine or whatnot, or maybe we'll just roll into it. But I'm live now. That's all I know.
Good. All right, Ash. Let's see.
As soon as I saw these patch notes, this dev blog come out, I knew you were going to do a show on it.
You're not coming up as rateable for some reason.
You just type the command.
The
Twitch takes time for like the changes to percolate through the system, but if you just type /raid space *Ashterothi, it'll work.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll do it. And we'll see if it works.
I'm rating me.
Is it working?
Yeah, I see it.
I don't see it.
Yeah, it's up. It's going.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, anyway, you guys please continue the conversation with Ashtarothi. The same gang, including myself, will be there. And again, Talking Stations Discord all day long. These changes are really interesting. We're going to continue to talk about them, see how you can benefit from them, get on the ground quickly, and also how to prepare for the long-term implications, because there are definitely some long-term implications going on here. Thanks, everyone, for joining us, all you guys in here, and we will see you on the other side in Ashtarothi's channel. Take care. Till tomorrow.
We don't usually all agree.